Hey guys, it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. I've had sort of a rough day. It has not been as productive as I would have liked, which there's not a whole lot to say there, just that InDesign sometimes is just the worst, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you can just sit there trying to solve problems, and maybe it'll work out and maybe it won't. We're all going to collectively pretend I'm not currently wearing the same thermal that I slept in, and that it's perfectly fine for me to be drinking this riesling from last week. Cheers! Okay, so the day this comes out, I need to check my calendar, but I believe the day this comes out is my friend Calabrina's birthday. So I wanted to start off with a little bit of the story that I wrote for her. I write a short story, as of the last 2 years, I write a short story for her birthday. Last year it was The Wish Bridge, which ended up in Midsummer Night Dreams, which is one of my favorite stories. And the story I wrote this year was like way weirder. It's called Clara and the Devil. And thank you, Calabrina, for inspiring that one. But yeah, so I thought I'd read you a little bit. It probably will end up in another collection of summer stories, which good luck to all of us for how these stories turn out. But anyway, here is a little excerpt from Clara and the Devil. What most people don't realize about the devil is that he isn't trying to hide. For example, when I met him, he didn't even bother using a fake name. It didn't really occur to me until later why that would be, but I guess it makes sense in retrospect. Shame isn't really something you feel when you're mostly interested in vice, I think. Before I met him, I might have thought he'd try to conceal himself, so as to better influence people or whatever the devil might be up to. I mean, when a guy comes up to you and he says he's the freaking devil, that's not really a good way to get a library card, is it? That's exactly what happened. "Hello, Clara," he said, just like that. Hello, Clara, not hi, not excuse me, nothing a normal person would say, and maybe that's what caught my attention. I usually wear a name tag, so it wasn't the name part, but there was something about his voice. "I would like a library card," he informed me. I guess it isn't that surprising that the devil is extremely handsome. Luckily, I'm not particularly swayed by looks, or at least not excessively so. Which isn't to say my boyfriend Isaac isn't handsome, because he is. I fell for him hard in 9th grade, and we've been dating ever since. We're coming up on 7 years now, which is a long time, even in our town. Not many people come in and out of here, to be honest. It's a nice town, but nothing too revolutionary. Suburban, quiet, something your mind can probably fill in the blanks for you right now. Sort of exactly the place you'd guess the devil might come, if you want to think about it that way. Isaac and I plan to stay, of course, or have plans to. We're both still in college, so we're in no rush, but next year, after we graduate, we'll probably get married and buy a house in town. He grew up in the country, over near the ranches, but I prefer to be closer to Main Street. Call me crazy, but I'm not a fan of solitary nothingness. "Okay," I said to the devil, though I didn't know he was the devil yet. "I just need your name, address, and proof of residency." I do this all the time, so the words flow out without much need to think about them. I'm actually studying literature, but my dream is to be the town librarian. It was, anyway. "I have a lot of names," said the devil. "Mara, Lucifer, Satanel, Samael." "Well, pick one," I told him. I wasn't really listening. To be honest, I was a little distracted. I do this thing sometimes where I look at a really good-looking guy's face and try to figure out what's wrong with it. I don't know, I guess it's sort of a coping mechanism. I'm in love with Isaac, obviously, and looks certainly aren't everything. But sometimes I get carried away. I'm overly imaginative, my mother says. I'm constantly daydreaming, and sometimes my mind does things I wish it wouldn't. I'm obviously getting distracted, like usual. But like I said, I tend to make a game out of seeing flaws in people who are conventionally attractive. My best friend Simon, for example, is really, really handsome. He's the kind of guy my other female friends get all worked up about, though by now I don't concern myself much with it. I can faintly see the scars on his face from picking at his acne when he was 12, even if he's got that perfect Obama-colored skin and traces of facial hair to shadow the bones of his cheeks now. Simon's been my neighbor my entire life, and even though I know objectively how handsome he is, and even though I know he knows it too, I still look for the scars. I don't know why I do it. I guess it comforts me in a way. Anyway, the devil's really handsome. Surprise, surprise. He's tall and thin, but not too thin. Black hair, sort of pale skin, but not really. He got pretty tan over the summer. He has extremely blue eyes. I asked him once if he always looks like that, and he said no, that was just the way he decided to look for this particular trip. You don't come to a town full of people like this and not come as a white man, he said. I laughed at the time, but uncomfortably. Where was I? Right. I told him to pick a name for the library card. Call me Nick, he said, as in Old Scratch. Oh, and by the way, he added, I'm the devil. People come into the library saying shit like that all the time. I'd be mad about it, but it's not like there's anything else going on. I'm just in charge of memberships, and like I mentioned, nobody new ever comes to town. The only exciting library business is the summer reading program, or maybe the writing award for the high school. Every year, kids compete for prizes to read the most books, or they can write their own. Marianne's in charge of events, though. She's 2 years older than me, and she's the one who coordinates with the mayor's office and all that. She's nice. She prefers I stick to memberships until, presumably, I work here full-time. Logistically speaking, it's best if we don't have too much overlap. Proof of residency, I said to the devil, and he shrugged. Just a card, thanks, he said. I can't give you a library card without proof that you live here, I told him. You know, taxpayers and stuff. I'm familiar with the concept of taxes, the devil said. I just need the card for a month, maybe 2, 3 tops, he said. I don't really plan to stay beyond the season. Oh, I said, registering that he was not, in fact, a resident. Are you staying at the Donna? There's only one hotel and it's on Main Street. Legend says it's haunted, though I'm really not sure what interest a ghost would have in it. It's nice enough, I guess. My mom is a caterer, and sometimes she does events there. Mostly, she has to travel to other towns. I think she expects me to help her once I graduate, which she seems pretty impatient for me to do. If not for Isaac and me both going to the local state school, I got a scholarship, he's there to play sports. I think she would have tried to talk me out of college. Yes, the devil told me, confirming his hotel, so I started filling out his paperwork. You said your name was Nick? I have a lot of names, he said again. Okay, I said, and thought, whatever. I filled out a form for Scratch, Nicholas D, as in Nick Scratch, the devil. He laughed when I showed it to him, which you wouldn't think is something the devil can do, but he does. He actually has a surprisingly good sense of humor. It's endearing, sort of, which I suppose is also not surprising. How effective would the devil be if he were serious all the time? Pretty sure that's God's job. Thank you, Clara, he said, and because I was still pretty bored, I asked him what he was so intent on reading that summer that made the library card so urgent. He said he was going to start with Proust. I told him I liked Proust, but I also liked Sartre and Camus, so maybe I just like stuff that's translated from French. He seemed amused. Actually, what he said was, there's no possible way you've ever told anyone that before. Not true, I said, though I'm not sure why I said it. I guess because I was tired of people telling me I'm pretentious, or implying it, even though I'm starting to think he wasn't. I think maybe he was just curious. I told my friend Simon, I clarified, and I had. Simon thinks I'm pretentious too, but not in a bad way. I think he likes the velvet bows I wear in my ponytail, or at least he doesn't make fun of them. He usually just calls me a snob and ruffles my hair and tells me to go to Paris or something for the snob convention. Simon? The devil echoed. Simon Morin? Simon Morin, I confirmed, and then, do you know him? Not intimately, said the devil, though perhaps I will. Then he tipped his head, the way he would have done if he were wearing a hat, and he gave me something of a small, absurdly formal bow. Perhaps I'll see you again, Clara, said the devil, and then he left, the automatic doors sliding open as he made his way back to the street, holding the library card I had given him. So anyway, that is the beginning of the story Clara and the Devil. It's a weird story, which I hope you guys will want to read when that does get to you. Calabrina gets to read it first, because it's for her. Not because I think she's the devil, but because I think she would enjoy him. So, I've got a few, quick writing questions, and then I'll read you a little bit from one for my enemy. Oh yeah, I did get my tattoo. It is here. It is celestial. It doesn't really mean anything. I kind of wanted ocean waves and stars and a crescent moon because sometimes you just gotta let that basic celestial bitch out, and I did. Let's see. Okay, so these are just going to be kind of rapid fire because I've either answered them before or they're just pretty easy to answer. So first, how do you choose excerpts to preview for chapter updates in my Tumblr posts? But I think it's relevant to a lot of things. Just how do you entice people? I just pick my favorite passages that aren't spoilers. Usually I'm choosing between like a romantic scene, like a few lines from a romantic scene, or something from a comedic scene. With like fan fiction, I mostly try to include the characters that people are trying to read, that they're there to read. But if doing so is a spoiler, which it often is, then I'll just pick like a random handful of lines that I just enjoy. I think usually you know what the good lines in your story are, so I use the passages that would make me want to read if I were the one looking at it. You ever get overwhelmed by how pumped up you are for a story? Like you're seriously into it and it's all coming together and you can't stop reading, rewriting, editing because it just flows, and it's the second week that you haven't slept well and divine inspiration is starting to feel like demonic possession. And how do you deal with it? So when I answered this question initially, I pointed out that I am bipolar and this is mania, and if it were me, then I would be a little worried, just on the sleep front. But assuming that you are actually like taking care of yourself and not terribly in need of a diagnosis, I say just write it out. I mean, that sort of thing is always followed by a crash. It's not like you could spend the next year writing and rewriting the same story. Eventually you would burn out. If burnout is something you're worried about, like this happens, I have a feeling maybe this happens and then you burn out and maybe you don't finish. That would be the thing. It doesn't strike me as a problem until you reach the stage where it doesn't have longevity. Because of course it doesn't, because you need to sleep and eat and take care of yourself. But I always think you got to take advantage of those times. So with the story that I just read, with Clara and the Devil, I actually was not supposed to be writing that story yet. I wrote it early, but I've been sort of struggling with a chapter that I need to get done for this week's Which Way story. I've been sort of stuck on that chapter. So I woke up and I was like, I need to write something, but even though that's the thing I need to get done, I don't think I can. So I'm just going to write something and see what comes out. And what came out was a story about the devil. So sometimes you just got to go with it. Just go with the muse. I think it's actually more productive that way. I mean, this was something that I was going to have to write at some point. So at least it's done now. But now I have to get back to my messy bisexual vampire love triangle. But yeah, just make sure that you're keeping track of yourself. Take care of yourself. And kind of be aware that like a burnout is on its way. So if you can't bring yourself to focus on anything else, then do this. Just focus on this, because eventually you're not going to be able to focus on this or anything. So you might as well get something done, even if it's not necessarily the thing that you thought you were going to get done. I don't know that that's helpful. I don't know that you actually really wanted my advice. It sounds like maybe you just wanted to commiserate, and yeah, that definitely happens. I get really excited about almost everything I'm writing, and sometimes it's hard not to think about, like, sometimes I need to, like, say now, when I need to be working on one story, but my brain is busy percolating on something else, which can be hard. But then I think you gotta go with the thing that the demon is telling you to write, because at least that way you're getting something done. You'll get to the other thing, assuming you have some discipline, which I hope that you do. And if we have to talk about discipline, that's another story. Okay, I have to ask, do you discuss plot ideas with someone who functions like an editor? Okay. I talk to Aurora a lot about plots, but I kind of talk at her a lot. I don't actually know if she likes it. It's definitely a lot of me texting her, okay, so I have this idea, and then it's like a string of like 17 texts, and she sort of asks me the important questions, I suppose. She doesn't do this so much for fan fiction, more with like original stuff and world building, the book that I just finished actually, which is sort of, I'm calling it an intimate, stylized portrait of love, of specifically obsessive love between two people with mental disorders, which is not to say that it doesn't work. I don't want to get too much into it, but the whole point is, how do you make a relationship work when you are unwell and so is your partner? Anyway, one of those characters he's a theoretical mathematician. He does a lot of work in quantum mechanics, and I could not have written this book without the conversations that I had with both Mr. Blake and Aurora, both of whom are scientists or in the science fields. And so the way that they look at the world versus the way that I look at the world is very distinct. So not that we talked about how the book was going to go so much, but the book and its contents were seriously impacted by just the random thought exercises that we had. That Aurora and I would talk about our theories about time, and then they would find their way into this book, and then I am, of course, the writer, so I'm sort of responsible for where the plot goes, but I would say that it wouldn't exist without her. And, okay, last question. Okay, every time I read one of your works, I get this weird inspiration to write. Thank you for that. You're welcome. My problem is that I can get these really good ideas, but when I try to write them, the words just aren't. I know what everything looks like and what they're thinking and how it's going to end, but all I can get written down is 5 paragraphs of stilted descriptions of how someone places their hands on a table or purses their lips. Do you have tips on getting my ideas out better? All right. Time for a harsh reality, which is you'll never be able to write something that's as good as it is in your head. This happens to me a lot with like action sequences, which it really feels like I'm just transcribing something that's happening inside my brain, which is never going to work. Because, I mean, there's a reason that we have movies and plays, because not everything can be a book. Some things you want to see. So it's never going to be as satisfying as it is inside your head. However, you get closer and closer the more you do this. Writing isn't about getting it right the first time. The first thing you write is shitty. First drafts are shitty. First books are shitty. First fics are shitty. You can't expect to get something right the first or the second or the 10th time you try it. It's something that develops over time. You can't look at writing as sort of like a one-shot thing. Writing is drills, basically. It's just constantly doing the same thing over and over until you get better at it, until you learn that the best way to phrase something is this way, or that to pace something this way makes it better. And the more comfortable you are writing a scene, the more comfortable you are writing a chapter. The more comfortable you are writing a chapter, the more comfortable you are writing an entire book. These things you can't just do one and then you can do it all. Each thing requires a different skill that you learn by doing. I don't know how encouraging that is. It should be encouraging. What's encouraging is you have to write it down. Even if it's no good, even if it feels like you're disappointing yourself, if it's written, that's the first step. That's huge. Because you can't do anything with a blank page. You can't edit a blank page. You certainly can't improve a blank page. So you just have to write it and then see why it doesn't fit what you're expecting for it. I think in my case, I'm often disappointed that I can't transcribe something exactly the way it happened in my head, but I find that it can sometimes be better if I just kind of work through it and just try to get it out there and then figure out what makes it appealing on the page. Because again, it sounds like you're really visualizing a lot of this stuff, and stuff that you are visualizing isn't going to translate very well to writing. That's really not how writing works. It's not the right medium if that's how you want to do things. I mean, obviously you can create those visuals and you get better at that over time. But I think initially it's going to continue to feel disappointing until you learn to work within the medium that you're using. Writing is impactful in a way that screenwriting isn't, because there are obviously limits to things that you can see, versus in a book you can feel what someone is feeling. You can see the insides of their heads. I guess I'm just very defensive of book writing being a craft in itself, because people tell me all the time that I should write scripts. And I think that's great, but there's something much more satisfying to me about getting an emotion right without depending on somebody's face to express it, you know? So anyway, which is just a side tangent. The point is you got to still do it. You got to write it and then you improve it and you just keep improving it until it gets better, and the more you do it, the better you are at it. That is just the truth. There's not a whole lot of natural talent when it comes to writing. A lot of it is just the discipline to do it over and over. But then being aware that, yeah, of course, you're a little limited. It's not going to be exactly what you think it's going to be in your head. But it might be better that way. You just have to let it happen. Guess what I got? One for My Enemy is now here. It's very exciting. I'm going to try reading Aurora's favorite scene, actually, but it's going to be difficult because there's some text messages, so you're going to have to try and follow me here. But this is Act 2, Scene 3, Unacceptable Hours. So it starts with text messages from an unknown number. Good morning. I know I should wait. What's the rule? 3 days? Anyway, doesn't matter because I can't. Mostly because it's a stupid rule, but also because I can't sleep. Not sure I'll be able to until I see you again, but try not to hold that against me. Sasha yawned, blearily glancing at the text on the screen before jumping at the sound of a knock at her door. She tucked her cell phone into her pillowcase, stowing it safely out of sight before sitting upright and groaning, pressing her fingers to her throbbing temples. Come in, she called, and her sister Maria poked her head inside, her hair already set in her usual polished waves. So I'm actually going to skip a little bit of Sasha and Maria's conversation because it is a spoiler. Okay. Sasha nodded, resting her head against her sister's shoulder, and abruptly, Maria jumped. What's that? She asked, alarmed, and Sasha laughed. It's my phone, she offered apologetically, catching the vibration and pulling it free from the pillowcase. Sorry. It's very early, Maria noted, frowning. Don't tell me you fell in love with the boy from last night. What? Sasha asked, startled. The boy, the bully from your class. Oh, right, Sasha exhaled, relieved her sister didn't somehow magically know about Lev. That, whatever it was, seemed like a secret she should keep to herself. At least for now. No, definitely not. Eric's terrible. Well, better terrible, Maria assured her, rising to her feet. It's the wonderful ones you have to watch out for. She leaned forward, lightly brushing her thumb across Sasha's cheek. I'll have more instructions for you later. Then she left, and Sasha quickly reached for her phone, reading the latest message. This is Lev, by the way. She rolled her eyes, changing his name in her phone. Have you never used a phone before? There's a protocol. Salutation, introduction, the decency to wait until an acceptable hour. She watched him type a response. Clearly, he'd been waiting for her answer. Acceptable hour? It's nearly noon. Sasha checked the clock. It's 7:45. Lev said. Look, I said nearly. I wasn't being specific. Are you normally this inexact? No, actually. I'm usually lauded for my accuracy. Sasha, her sister Galina interrupted, bursting into the room and startling Sasha into dropping her phone on the floor. Do you have that red sweater? What red sweater? The red one, Galina repeated impatiently, and, true to form, unhelpfully. You know, with the... She gestured vaguely to her wrists. The sleeves? If you mean the bell sleeves, then it's not mine, it's Lilia's, Sasha said, leaning down to pick up her phone. But you wore it on Tuesday, Galina said. Yes, Sasha sighed, but that doesn't make it mine, does it? And Lilia hates red. She normally does, Sasha permitted disinterestedly. But she said she liked the... Look, do you want it or not, Galia? She demanded, and Galina gave a contemptuous sniff. Always so rude in the mornings, she said, and shut the door behind her, leaving Sasha to look back down at her texts. She had sent a number of letters and numbers and symbols, and an asterisk. And Lev said, Are you by chance having a stroke, or have I already reduced you to incoherence? I dropped my phone, said Sasha, and you're awfully cocky, aren't you? I could be, if that's what you like, said Lev. Or I could be an intellectual, or at least try to be. What do you think is more vast, the universe or time? Sasha sighed. Stop, she said. Stop what? Which part? Be specific. All of it. Most of it. Lev said. You and I need to have a talk about words, specifically specificity. Sasha, her sister Lilia interrupted sleepily, sticking her face between the door and the frame. Do you have my red sweater? No, Sasha sighed, exasperated. Galia just asked me for it. Right, she's looking for it, Lilia confirmed, stifling a yawn. So do you have it? No, Sasha groaned. I don't. Well, then who does? Lilia, I don't know. Who are you texting? Lilia asked, suddenly awake enough to slip inside the room and look at Sasha's screen before earning herself a well-deserved shove. Is it a boy? Are you texting a boy? What boy? Sasha heard from the hallway, just before Galina poked her head in. I didn't know you had a boyfriend, Sashenka. I don't, Sasha insisted, glaring at both her sisters. Can you both just go away, please? What boy? I heard boy, announced Irina, appearing in the room as she sipped loudly at her coffee. Tell me about him. You don't even live here, Sasha growled. Speaking of boys, Galina said to Irina, have you broken up with that, what was his name? Vanilla, Lilia supplied dreamily and then frowned, noticing Irina's outfit. Is that my red sweater? No, it's Sasha's, Irina said, and he's not vanilla, he's just, from Connecticut. Ugh, said Galina and Lilia in unison, making twin faces of disdain as Sasha let out a loud groan. Can you all get out, please? And Irka, that's not my sweater, it's Lilia's, she said. Give it back to her so she can give it to Galia so they can both leave me alone. Always so grumpy in the mornings, Irina tutted disapprovingly, as Galina nodded, the three of them finally exiting the room. So Sasha looks at her text messages again. So when can I see you again? We can have a summit about language, or not, totally up to you. I'm working tonight, said Sasha. I didn't ask when I couldn't see you. Honestly, is that school you go to even accredited? I'm just stating the relevant facts, Sasha said, you dick. Lev sent a frown face emoticon. Sasha groaned again. Fine, you can come by for 15 minutes, but you'll have to buy something. I mean it. She waited, watching him type. Lev sent a smiley face emoticon. She sighed. Do people ever tell you you're impossible? From time to time, I take it as a compliment. Don't you? It's so easy to be possible. It seems silly to limit myself to that. You're impossible, said Sasha. Stop, Lev said. I'm blushing. We have a serum for that. It's $74.99. Wow, Lev said. You didn't tell me you were a thief. We thieves don't usually open with our occupations, said Sasha. Bad for business. Lev said, I want to know everything about this. Like, is there a club for thieves? Can I join? What are the initiation rites? Blood oaths? Yes or no? Is there a monthly fee? Do you host networking events? Do you have an alter ego? Oh, do you wear a mask? Please tell me you wear a mask. Stop talking immediately, said Sasha. You're right, said Lev. I should save these winning conversation topics for later. See you tonight. Sasha smiled and then immediately frowned. It wasn't as if this was going to be anything. Who was he, after all? She didn't even know his last name. Not that she intended for such things to matter. Sasha! Galina yelled. Do you have that teal skirt? It's going to look awful with that red sweater, Sasha yelled back. What red sweater? Galina shouted. Sasha sighed again and texted Lev. See you tonight. So anyway, that's Aurora's favorite scene. It's a fun one. It's actually really hard to read excerpts of this book without giving away massive spoilers because something pretty huge happens in basically all 5 of the acts. So, cool. I used to have sort of a problem with books like dragging in the middle, and hopefully this one, that's not the case, but it's really impossible to tell. Well, I've at least accomplished one thing today outside of fighting with Adobe. Oh, also, I'm going to a conference next week in San Francisco, so I won't be able to record a video, so we're going to skip this week. Also, the Commoner's Guide is probably going to be a couple of days late. I don't think it's going to skip a week, I just think it's going to be late. Not tomorrow after this comes out, but the week after that. So, yeah. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, then I'm not dead. I don't think. That would be so weird if I predicted it from right now when this video came out. Anyway, go ahead and say happy birthday to Calabrina. And have a wonderful day and week, potentially 2 weeks. And, yeah. Well, this has been me, Olivie Blake. Not writing. And I will see you, not next week, but the week after. That was a terrible ending. And I will see you next time.